We are talking Amityville Scarecrow, and this one is directed by Jack Peter Monday, and it's produced by prolific B-movie producer Scott Jeffries. And this is another one of these kind of Amityville movies that use the name that is in the public domain. So let me just explain what I mean by that in case you haven't watched a video like this before. So the name Amityville is actually in the public domain, meaning anyone can make a movie and call it Amityville something, because Amityville is a legitimate place in America. People can't kind of copyright it. So there is an official series of Amityville movies, but there's a hell of a lot of movies that are just called Amityville something because they can use the name and it kind of associates it with a kind of a larger IP. So that's what happens quite a lot. So this is produced by Jagged Edge Productions, which is a British movie company, low budget movie company, and it's obviously made in Britain with a English cast, but pretends it's kind of in America, although it makes very little effort to do so. What is this story? So it focuses on this family which has had a little bit of a troubled past in regard to a kind of family feud. You've essentially got two kind of middle-aged women who are sisters who have kind of fallen out about a guy, and they've both got kind of like an adult daughter, so to speak. So this group of family kind of get together to try and decide what to do with this kind of plot of land, the Amityville farm, basically, and or Amityville cornfield, and was left to them by their mother. And you know, there's a little bit of rivalry kind of going on, a little bit of bickering, but all that's put aside when there seems to be life in the sinister looking scarecrow that is on their property and comes after them with a murderous spree. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So these kind of movies produced by Scott Jeffrey are made quickly and cheaply, and I've reviewed quite a lot of them here, and let's be honest, they tend to be made just to kind of have a cool looking cover that kind of people pick up and think, oh, that looks good, and it's kind of like quite a basic story. Some of them can be a little better than others, but for the most part they're a little on the weaker side, to be putting it mildly. But what can we say that works in this movie's favour? One thing I was impressed with this movie is the actual Scarecrow costume. I think looks pretty decent here. I've seen a number of low budget kind of Scarecrow films, and quite often the Scarecrow itself kind of looks a little bit janky and a little bit rubbish. This one, I've got to say, the actual makeup looks pretty menacing. It does look like they put some effort into kind of putting this kind of thing together to make it look menacing. And the other thing as well, and this, again, I criticise other films of this, when we have like a supernatural kind of being, like a kind of animated scarecrow, I think it shouldn't walk and kind of act like a human. And again, this one, you know, it's kind of like walking a little bit kind of strangely and kind of not quite kind of normally, and you know, like with a limp and things like this. So it looks a little bit more kind of unusual than kind of a guy in a suit who's kind of walking around in a normal fashion. Obviously it is a guy in a suit, but at least there's an attempt here to kind of make this look a little unnatural in the kind of the way it moves, a little bit kind of like jerky in its kind of movements and things like that, which I thought was quite good. Another aspect I quite enjoyed with this movie is there's no real central character. We get a group of essentially 5 members of this family kind of turn up, and one of them is clearly cannon fodder, but the other 4, you're not quite sure who's actually kind of the main character, which does give the movie a little bit of a, you know, an effect where you're not quite sure who out of these people are going to die and who's going to kind of survive. Because they all get kind of a reasonable amount of kind of screen time, and you get the old, you know, you get the Scott Jeffrey regular actors turn up here, Nicola Wright, Chelsea Greenwood, you know, maybe we should call them corn stars at this point in this movie. You know, and the movie, because obviously Scott Jeffries makes such a big amount of movies, they're relatively kind of put together for a kind of a low budget affair. It's at least competently directed in regard to technical aspects like lighting and camera movement, things like this, framing, editing. It's done to a reasonable standard because they do make so many of these films, so there's plenty of experience there. But let's talk about what I think doesn't work in this movie. It's really a by the numbers kind of humdrum slasher without any real kind of visual kind of flair or originality. You know, it's very much kind of paint by numbers in regards to a kind of a plot. It's nothing special. A group of people turned up in this particular remote area and there's some type of killer entity there. That's your movie basically. So story-wise, it's pretty generic, if we're honest. Outside of that, what else can I say? As I've kind of alluded to, this is one of these films that is produced and made by, you know, the UK and with UK talent that pretends to be American, and I never really think it particularly works. I mean, there's very little effort to be made here that to fool you into thinking it's an American production. We get a couple of the actors put on an American accent, which, I'll be fair, I've seen worse examples of that, but the majority of the cast actually just speak in their English accents, so it's kind of like, you know, what's the point? But yeah, obviously the cars, the kind of the architecture, the kind of like the scenery and so on, they're clearly in the UK, so there's very little here to kind of fool you into thinking that it's actually in America. It just says it is, and it's like, oh come on, there's not much effort here to disguise the fact. I gotta say, I thought the Scarecrow was on screen less than I was expecting. It maybe pads up the running time a little bit with a little bit too much kind of family drama, if I'm honest. You know, we expect to have these kind of sort of things to ultimately kind of make the movie a feature-length production, make it a kind of a longer film so it can be sold as a feature. Because obviously the actual plot here involving the Scarecrow is relatively kind of scant. So instead we have subplots in regards to drama. But I've got to say, I think that he spent a little bit too much time. You don't really get any type of, outside of the kind of the intro, any type of kind of supernatural shenanigans. It's about 45 minutes into the movie. I think it's a little bit too long there. And when we do have this kind of Scarecrow kind of like, you know, attack people, you know, it looks cool. The Scarecrow, the makeup looks good, the costume looks good, but I think there was a missed opportunity to have it be kind of creepy and like foreboding and kind of a stalking, like, you know, where's the Scarecrow gone? Where it was, it's disappeared and things like that. Who's moved it? Things like this. It's not there. It's just kind of like lunging at people straight away. No real attempt to have a kind of a genuinely spooky kind of feel. I always refer to the kind of the mid-80s movie called Scarecrows of Ted Vernon, which to me was a great example of how to make a kind of a Scarecrow movie scary. But there's very few movies have kind of done that, in my opinion. It kind of lends itself to it, but they just don't do it. Some of the acting, I've got to say, is a little bit on the kind of the hokey side. Again, people are sort of saddled with an American accent when they're in the UK. As I said, I don't think this is the worst example of that, but nonetheless, there is, I think, acting here is a little bit kind of, you know, hokey at times. And the movie's relatively bloodless. And I'm assuming this was kind of a cost-cutting exercise, so rather than, you know, just to have kind of kills kind of off-screen or obscured somehow. So it really is a little toothless as well in regards to, you know, that type of thing. I mean, I can't imagine they're trying to get a lower rating here. I should think it's just a case of they can't afford to do, or they don't want to kind of like put the money into doing kind of like gory effects outside of kind of squirts of blood and things like that. So overall, it's somewhat of a mundane experience. I don't necessarily think it's a terrible film. It's watchable if you're kind of very undemanding and you just really love Scarecrow movies. I think there is at least a decent looking kind of Scarecrow on display here. And, you know, it's kind of serviceable, I suppose, in other aspects, but it's certainly nothing to write home about. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.